So, Sawyer Robertson, after the game against Texas Tech, he was named today as the Earl Campbell Tyler Rose Award winner. 5 touchdowns against Tech in his hometown where he played high school ball. Others were involved in the honors as well, including Bryson Washington was a part of that too, the running back, as far as what he got with the Big 12. But 3 guys were a part of that list that Craig puts together, Josh Cameron, the receiver, but Sawyer Robertson. I thought what Phil Bennett said yesterday, he goes, if you watch him play and what you've watched, even when they've not played well or even when they've lost, which has been 4 times, you wonder why he was not the starter coming out. And, of course, DeQuan Finn came in from Toledo, was the starter. He got injured and also was here because of a nice NIL deal too.
You know, we talked to the assistant coaches. You know, we had a little get-together, and when I asked about, you know, the difference between DeQuan and Jake and Sawyer as far as, you know, what practices were like, basically at that time, and it was still a couple weeks before they named the starter, it was that neither of them had really put together consecutive good practices. It was like one guy one day, the next guy the next day. Then – or it would be 2 and 2, and then they couldn't separate, and they, I think, erred on the side of speed in DeQuan Finn and athleticism. And then when DeQuan Finn got hurt, it opened it up for Sawyer Robertson. And, you know, we just had J.J. Joe on the show the other day. Grant Taff, you know, I've heard him say this many times, mostly just, I think, to make fun of J.J., but he said that J.J. was like one of the worst practice players he ever had. You know, that J.J. in practice was – but then in the games, the lights come on, he was just better. And maybe that's Sawyer Robertson for better or worse right now. And maybe now that the lights come on and he's confident he's playing, things are different. But that was the issue, is that neither of them were separating from themselves, which is why Sawyer wasn't the starter to start out with.
Yeah, I think it probably also had to do with you didn't have a very good O-line. So what are you going to do with Sawyer back there? He's doesn't have protection. He can't throw the football. Doesn't really do a whole lot of good to have him out there just taking hits, so you at least put the elusive guy back there who can maybe take off and run with it a little bit. So I think that might have played somewhat into it as well. But Sawyer's settled in nicely since DeQuan got hurt. Nice to see DeQuan come back last week and have the big back-breaking touchdown run against Tech that really, I mean, it was already over, but at least answered some of their late – you know, let's polish this turd scores that they had. I mean, that made the score look a little bit different than the actual game played out. You know what I mean? So to have DeQuan come in there and put another touchdown on the board, I think was a really great moment just because of what he's been through, but also because the way that game was starting to finish up. But, yeah, Sawyer's played really well. 5 touchdowns speak for themselves. Bryson Washington and Josh Cameron were honorable mentions, and they both had great games as well, and there was others from the state of Texas and around the state of Texas that were a part of that list. But Sawyer was, I think, the pretty clear choice this week with what he did, and just been a really long time, I realize, since there's been any kind of honors like that for any Baylor players. I mean, there might have been a special teams player of the week here and there over the last couple of years, but I know on the Earl Campbell stuff, I've maybe put like 3 guys in 2 years on these lists, because the offense has done nothing to warrant having individuals being acknowledged for offensive performances. So to have 3 in 1 week just tells you what an explosion they had on offense. Also not great for Tech to give up 3 individual performances like that. Yeah. But maybe they're starting to cook. Maybe Tech is just the start of them putting up a lot of points, but Sawyer definitely deserving there.
All right, so he gets the Campbell Award, and that is to and again, Craig, the criteria, you have to have played high school football in Texas, or you play for a college football team that no matter where you're from, that is in the state of Texas, correct?
Yeah, it's like Earl Campbell. I mean, he played high school ball in Texas, played college football in Texas. So if you did one or the other, or both, obviously both would qualify you, but one or the other gets you in. And, you know, there was a time when just being born in Texas like Earl was would be, you know, enough. But then again, guys move away. You know, they don't go to school here. What's the point of, you know, you were born here, but you moved away to Louisiana when you were 2 and you grew up there. So you kind of have to cut it off somewhere as far as the Texas ties go. So to have the high school factor in there, given how important that is and, how much that means for guys in this state to play football in high school. And then, obviously, it allows for some out-of-staters to be a part of it as well because they chose to come play college football in the state of Texas. So I think you hit it from both directions as far as guys representing the state in some form or fashion. So,
All right. Jackson Arnold, this was late yesterday, but we'll have it. Jackson Arnold, this is not a surprise because he got in the game last week in the beatdown against South Carolina. Jackson Arnold back as the starting quarterback at Oklahoma. Of course, they had Joe John Finley, now the offensive coordinator, with Seth Luttrell out. Before you guys discuss this, here's a note on where Oklahoma is entering this week. When it comes to where they are in the nation, 133 schools that are ranked in the NCAA, they are 128th in the country out of 133 with total offense, 116th passing, 114th rushing, 107th in points scored. Now, defensively, they're number 32 in the country, and that's very respectable, but their offense has been atrocious. They've had injuries, especially at wide receiver, an incredibly brand new offensive line, but they have had nothing in the holster throughout the year on offense.
Yeah, I want y'all to, by the way, pull up the Big 12 standings because I want to ask y'all a question about that. But that has to do with this. But, initially when they made the change from Jackson Arnold, I was fine with it, all for it because he was not playing well. Obviously, as the weeks have gone on, you understand that it was a much bigger issue than just Jackson Arnold. Now, they didn't make him throw interceptions, but
yeah,
I don't think they gave him much to work with either. And then you add in the wide receiver injuries and the O-line being all out of whack compared to the success they've had in recent years. And it was just a bad pot of gumbo with everything was rotten. And you're throwing rotten shrimp in with rotten everything else, crab and sausage and all that. It's just a big bad of ugly. And so that's what that offense has been. There's nothing really anything positive to take away from that offense. Granted, parts of it are entirely missing, like the receivers, but I think this is the logical move. I mean, he burned his red shirt. Mm-hmm. So you're just going to have him sitting there, red shirt burnt, while Michael Hawkins, who is a far lesser investment and far less of a threat to go somewhere else, you're going to let him play and play poorly? So, yeah, this is the logical step, especially when you made the change at OC. Clearly something wasn't working with Seth Luttrell. We'll see if Joe John Finley, who was also the ire of a lot of people, along with Brent Venables and along with Seth Luttrell, there are a lot of people that, threw Joe John Finley's name in there as well. So we'll see. He comes from the Baylor Bryles lineage, Joe John Finley does. He was on staff here for a little while. He's followed those guys around, the Lebbies and those types of guys, and learned from them, coached with them. So I think we'll probably see some elements of that style of offense with what they decide to do. But, yeah, I think that just makes all the sense in the world as they go back to Jackson Arnold, considering you're basically hitting the reset button on the entire offense as you enter this week. So, yeah, I get that. Now, as far as why I asked y'all, or y'all talk about Jackson Arnold first, then I'll ask y'all the question.
I think that my concern about Jackson Arnold is if he doesn't start playing again, will they lose him too? Now, they could go out and find who the guy we're about to talk about is at Indiana, someone like that. But Hawkins just appears to be one-dimensional.
That's not. Yeah. That's kind of like picking out a quarterback at the transfer portal is kind of like fruit at like thumping a melon. Like when you buy a cantaloupe, you're like, oh, that one sounds good. Well, you could wind up with a Curtis Rourke melon or a Cam Ward melon, or you could get a DJU melon.
Cade McNamara.
You could get a Cade McNamara melon. That's what you could get, Or, you could, again, it's just that's something I wouldn't bet on for them. And given the fact that they don't appear to likely to win a lot of games this year unless they get a quarterback in there who's proven. Who are the other transfers that are going to come in there and help?
And once that red shirt was burned and then you switch callers like that, there's no question to be had. You had to put Jackson Arnold back in there to see if he's got a little something. So, yeah, I mean, once that red shirt especially was burned, it was either play him and get the most out of him or, get that transfer portal revved up and go ahead and put his name in there because
they're going to have to go deep into they're still going to have to go to the portal.
No, but I'm just saying, like, if you wouldn't have played him after burning his red shirt, like there's no decision to be made. Like, this was the obvious thing that you had to do. So yeah, we'll see what he's got. I mean, he's obviously a talented player. He was a 5-star ranked player out of high school for a reason. I don't know that rankings are always all that accurate. There are misses, but I think that most profilers are able to spot talent, and I think everybody in the country offering this kid, they all saw something in him. So we'll see if the new changes can get that out of him. But all right, you're looking at the Big 12 standings. I had this question on the earlier podcast, the Bearcast, and I'm not saying this to pick on Oklahoma. I'm genuinely curious what y'all think. Where would they be in the standings right now, do you think? It's impossible to know with like who they would play and all of that, but just knowing what you know about them and knowing what you know about the Big 12, where do you think they would be sitting right now?
I would say at best case scenario, they're in the middle of the pack because of that. Defense is still really good.
Yeah,
there's a 3-4 team, West Virginia, Arizona. They're just after halfway mark.
I would say that they would be at best there, but their offense, I mean, like you've got Kansas State, Tech, Colorado, Cincinnati, BYU. They all have really good offenses. And
Shedeur would throw for 350 on them and 4
exactly.
TDs.
So, you've got all these good offenses. The question isn't, okay, so say they hold Colorado to like Kansas State did in the 28 to 31 point range. Can they score 32 points?
Well,
no.
It's different than – and here's the thing. The Big 12, no matter what anyone thinks, the styles have changed. It's more of a league. Doesn't mean there's not guys putting up passing numbers like we just mentioned with Sawyer Robertson or what Avery Johnson did last week, among others. But it's become a league that I don't know, and this is me trying to be the devil's advocate, it's more of a league that people are winning with defense and a running game. The problem is Oklahoma does not have a running game. They don't have a passing game, and I don't know how many points they would score from week to week. I would say in that middle of the pack at best. They've lost to Tennessee, right?
Yeah.
They've lost to Texas.
Lost to good teams. They've lost to good teams.
Yeah. Is there anybody in the Big 12, if they played OU's schedule, just a legitimate question, if they played OU's schedule, would they have beaten Tennessee, Oklahoma, or who else am I missing here?
Well, Auburn. Said Oklahoma.
Auburn?
They beat Auburn.
They beat Auburn. Tennessee, Texas. And
I think some teams could beat Auburn, but I'll say this. Let's not forget that Houston almost beat them in Norman.
No, yeah.
A month ago.
And Houston's at the bottom down there at the bottom of the
Houston's not record-wise the worst team in the Big 12. Oklahoma State is at 0-4 in the league, but somebody threw that question my way. I said they'd be somewhere in the middle because I think that defense would still smother some teams. But, yeah, they nearly lost to Houston, who's the worst team arguably in the entire league, in Norman, Oklahoma, mind you.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I think that I'd take BYU and Iowa State and K-State and Colorado, and then it would be a matter of how many more you want to add on to that.
Let's put it this way. They would not come in with any intimidation unless you just looked at the name. They also lost to South Carolina, and they were blown out. So they've been blown out in 2 games, and Tennessee was beating them up pretty good before they made a little surge at the end to cut that thing down to 10. Good question, Craig. I don't know. Chat room, you guys give us your thoughts. Speaking of transfer quarterbacks, this guy, I watched him just riddle. Not just Nebraska. I've seen him riddle everybody. Now, they get tested again this week, but I don't know. Will they? Curtis Rourke. Paul talked with Zach Osterman earlier today. We'll have him in the 5 o'clock hour, who covers Indiana football. One of the great stories, their coach, Signetti. I just love, man, he's phenomenal. His thumb that he injured against Nebraska when he had like a fingernail pop off is improving. Could be back for Michigan State on November 2nd, but the game against Washington is still very doubtful this weekend.
Yeah. Zach said that, Washington's not going to happen, but their backup quarterback started 5 games a year ago. Their running game is really good anyway. They've been in a couple games that were close for a second. The Northwestern game was close, and then they pulled away. But they haven't played a close game yet, and stands to think that if they, can just kind of keep some balance there, they should be able to win against Washington. Michigan State, maybe, but he's definitely back for Michigan. A game that now looks like they have a great shot to win because Michigan has no idea who the quarterback is.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough loss for Indiana when they're coasting along like they are. This guy's played a lot of football. It's his 6th year. I remember seeing him at Ohio for what seemed like the longest time. I guess that was 4 or 5 seasons there, and now 6 at Indiana. But that's definitely something to monitor. I didn't think we'd really give much of a damn about Indiana quarterback play, but they've made it matter. And the last time we talked about Indiana quarterbacks, we were talking about Michael Penix having transferred from Indiana, and then the run he went on at Washington. So they've definitely made some noise with Cignetti, and things are going great there. But part of the magic of some of these rides is you have to have health. So hopefully they can get him back sooner rather than later to continue their story. And you'd hate to see it get derailed by, somebody getting injured. But that's part of the deal as well. So that's something to definitely monitor. By the way, we got pretty booked up with guests yesterday because there was just a whole reason. There's reasons why. So we didn't have a lot of. Didn't get to talk about Nebraska very much. I don't know why we didn't talk about Nebraska.
I brought them up. Indiana beat their ass.
This is the losers club.
Here's the thing.
This is the whole losers club.
Florida
this entire
State,
set.
It's contagious. Florida State sucked early, then Oklahoma sucked early, and then Nebraska sucked last weekend against Indiana.
I think you were filibustering like in a debate where they're like, tell us about your real border plan. You're like, you know what the real enemy is, my opponent.
I asked about Cignetti last night against Phil Bennett.
You did.
Let me tell you. Let me put it this way. What Cignetti, there's looks on the sideline. They're up 42-7, and it looks like he's trying to figure out where he's going to go and, take people out. He's got that killer assassin look on his face with a little bit of smartass of a smile. He is phenomenal. Won at Elon. He won, of course, at James Madison. Some of what he's got at Indiana is James Madison. They
a lot of what he's got at Indiana. They were a lot of
12
guys.
or 13 guys, And then even James Madison. Remember what they did earlier this year in North Carolina? They're still pretty good. So, I don't know. They're really explosive. One of the things that they have that I thought, besides everything, is their wide receivers. I didn't look at their height, but I tell you what I did look at. They look like they're tall, angular, wingspan, and Rourke throws the ball to where they can catch it and nobody else.
Yeah, he's really good, and they've got a lot of talent, and he's done a really nice job in a short amount of time. It obviously helps to have a lot of guys from a winning culture that already know how you practice and how you do all these things, and to bring a lot of those guys over certainly helped. But part of the reason why I ask is not for Indiana purposes, but Nebraska's still 5-2.
Yeah.
But
Ohio State this week.
They got Ohio State this week, and they lost by 49 points.
Look, here's the thing. You cannot – one happens one week does not translate to the other.
Stop it. No, they'll lose by 56 this weekend. They have Ohio State. There's a possibility if they're going to ever get back to a bowl game, which they have UCLA at home.
If they don't get back to – they're getting back to a bowl game. They're not going to go 0 for the rest of the season.
I don't trust them.
That's fine, but they're not going to not win a game the rest of the way.
They have to win once.
Yeah.
Ohio State.
I mean, there's one right there. They
have to play Wisconsin and Iowa.
Okay,
Iowa
you skipped over UCLA.
No, I didn't. I just mentioned them. But they have to play Iowa and Wisconsin. Both of those programs have owned them.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a new day. You need some sort of optimism.
No,
Look,
I mean, they're better, but better is what?
Craig and I are in the desert here, man.
Garrett, I wish you could pull up that tweet from yesterday from Chatelain, Dirk Chatelain. He covers Nebraska football.
I mean, you got a point, though. I mean, they've got a tough schedule
what
remaining.
What if they just throw up on themselves against UCLA? Who they got to beat?
They got to beat UCLA. That's where 6 wins comes from, is beating UCLA.
Let me tell you something. I'm not looking forward to any of it, but there we are, the Indiana quarterback. I will be there. 40-plus years of greatness, and all of a sudden now the last 10, 12 years has been just an absolute nightmare. Now I know what a lot of other programs dealt with for so many years. Quinn Ewers, I even hate that this is a story, because after the game against Georgia, there were a couple of reports out that Quinn Ewers was thinking about shutting it down and getting himself ready for the NFL draft. Quinn Ewers needs to freaking play, especially after Georgia. He needs to go out and shine and have the rest of the year. So the story is false. The speculation is false. He's not going anywhere. He's there to try to help if he can get Texas back off the floor and get themselves highly up into the conversation of the best teams in college football, which they are, but then prove it.
Yeah, you know what? I think it sucks for Quinn that these stories pop out. Because this isn't like it makes him look like a jerk.
And what, the 247 said they got hacked or something? Is that what they said?
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how much but they said they got their Instagram got hacked is what I saw.
But bottom line,
somebody put together a really nice graphic to hack that though.
That you have to, you do this and like you put this story out, and then Quinn Ewers has to deal with it, and his people have to deal with it when it's never the thing. And what about?
It's annoying.
Here's the thing. What about anything about Quinn Ewers that we know he's been in the spotlight for 4 years now would tell you that one loss is going to put him to the NFL, or that Arch Manning being on that roster bothers him, because if Arch Manning being on the roster bothered him, he could have left a year ago.
Right.
Like he could have just gone and been like, you know what? I don't like this. This makes me uncomfortable. I'm going to go to South Carolina. I don't know. I mean, he wouldn't have gone to South Carolina, but I'm going to go somewhere else.
Well, it makes even less sense when he was the starter at the end of the game and Steve Sarkisian said he's the starter moving forward after the game.
Yep.
So it would be one thing had Arch replaced him and Arch stayed in the game. Arch was in there for, what, 2 drives?
Two drives. Had one decent run.
Had a decent
run.
But
looked like he was a deer in the headlights, too.
Yeah, he's playing the freaking Georgia defense, who's at fuller strength than they had been, and was giving everybody on that offense an issue. So, yeah, it'd be one thing if Arch finished the game and they played respectfully, but Quinn came back in, and Sarkisian was very clear in why he did what he did. It was just to get Quinn refocused, and it looked like it worked. It looked like it was actually it looked like it was like, oh my God, is this all falling apart right in front of our eyes? Like they're actually doing the Arch thing. Like, oh my God, in real time, this is happening, what everybody thought might happen. And then Arch doesn't play particularly well, and they go back to Quinn, and it's like, oh, okay. And then you realize, like, oh, that was actually really brilliant because Quinn clearly got the message and was a different, player in some ways in the second half. So I don't know if he intended it to work exactly that way, but it worked out well for Sarkisian, and there's not a big controversy, but then there's stuff like this, and it just doesn't make any sense.
The fans have whoever they have, but from all indications, and this is me, a couple of texts of people who cover the team, that everybody understands who the number one quarterback is, no matter how much Arch is beloved and also how well he's played when he's had a chance to play. Tough news for SMU. Young man that was on our show, R.J. Maryland, kind of a tight end hybrid, out for the year because of a knee injury. He took a pass out in the flat. Somebody came up to make a tackle, hit him right at about the knees. You see that a lot. You can't hit anybody above the neck, and you got to be careful with this. Rhett Lashley's pretty upset about the tackle. R.J. Maryland, one of their main weapons, is out for the rest of the year.
Yeah, he is a tough player. I mean, he's tough to cover. He's like 6'7" or something, isn't he? He's ridiculously tall. He's fast. He's big and strong. We had him on the show. And he was great. Feel terrible for the kid. I think his NFL prospects are still going to be there because of the kind of athlete he is, but this is certainly going to slow that down. But yeah, it really sucks for R.J. Maryland.
Yeah, unfortunate. I hate to see any good players get injured and have to miss significant time. He's just a junior, so he's got plenty of eligibility and whatnot to sort through whatever he ends up deciding to do. If it's the NFL draft, and that's there for him as well. But yeah, he's not 6'8", he's 6'4", so he's not like some massive giant, but he's a big guy.
6'4" is pretty good for a receiver.
Yeah, it's not 6'7" though.
Who said that?
I thought Paul said that.
Okay.
Yeah, no, he's 6'4", but yeah, he's a good player and obviously made a big impact for them at various points throughout the year. So that's a tough loss for that offense. They've got other options, but yeah, that's one of their main guys. So to lose him, that's going to be interesting to see how they potentially hurt from that. But SMU's rolling on along. I mean, they're sitting there in the top 25, and their burner accounts are as loud as ever. They're going to Duke here this weekend, so that ought to be an interesting matchup. And then they got Pitt right after that, so another top 25 team. And then beyond that, they can just coast because they don't play anybody of substance from the rest of the ACC. I guess Virginia's okay. Boston College is okay, but really their two biggest games are coming up with
What's
Duke.
The difference in your philosophy when you say okay or fine? Which is worse?
I think it's kind of the same thing.
Okay, all right.
I think I say fine when teams are really getting hyped up, and it's like they're fine. They're not like great. And then when you're just okay. But, yeah, I say fine when people are maybe getting a little bit too much love, in my opinion, and you need to tap the brakes a little bit.
All right, Kobe Bryant, we don't have the graphic, but Kobe Bryant of Kansas won the Bronco Nagurski National Defensive Player of the Week with a huge game, 3 interceptions, a tackle behind the line of scrimmage in their win against Houston over the weekend. Max Olson with his stop rate. This is the stop rate on how many points per drive a team scores against your defense. Texas, one of the things that despite the loss, the defense gave them a chance. It just did not work out, although Georgia did have the critical 90-yard drive to seal it in the fourth quarter from their 10-yard line and converted a third down and 10 or 12. There are teams that you would expect, Ohio State, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Army. They're not just running the ball and doing well with Bryson Daly and company, but 5th in the country. Iowa State, not a surprise, although UCF ran through their business over and over and over again with big, huge long runs in that Iowa State eventually win. James Madison, Ole Miss, Indiana, not just an offensive juggernaut, but playing on both sides of the ball. Wisconsin, Duke at number 11, a little bit of still Mike Elko in them. Then we'll go down just a little bit. Colorado is 12, by the way. 12.
Manny Diaz is the coach there now, and he's one of the best defensive minds in the country, too. So
Oklahoma, yeah. So Colorado is 12. These aren't on the list, I don't think. Colorado's 12. There they are. Oklahoma 14th. Navy, so you have both service academies, or 2 of the 3 service academies, and Utah 17. 32, by the way, is Georgia, although their defense played incredibly well. Memphis, metal. Big Memphis fan there at 31 in the stop rate that Max does every single week during the season. All right. Barry Odom, UNLV, Boise State, and our running back, and Ashton Jeanty. They're playing on Friday night. Do we have the audio, Garrett? Here is Barry Odom talking about Boise State star running back Ashton Jeanty.
It'll take everybody. We've got to be, tremendous in our number 1 schematic plan. Number 2, we've got to be great tacklers. We've got to swarm the ball, and it'll be, nobody's slowed him down yet. So we've got a great challenge ahead of us, and they're a wonderful team. And the great thing is, though, we're pretty good too. So we got to go to work. We got to have a great plan, and then we need to go execute. And I know our guys will be excited.
All right. That's Barry Odom from Paloma. Villicano, thank you, from Fox News in Vegas on what is a great matchup and playoff implications here for Boise State especially.
Yeah, I mean, for both. I mean, Boise State's the one, but look, UNLV can get in this thing too, especially if you have what would be the best G5 versus G5 win over Boise State and right now the Heisman favorite. Nobody's stopped him yet. It's going to be very interesting to see, and better than 2 of the games that we got last Friday night. We get Boise State and UNLV this Friday night. These are 2 teams evenly matched talent-wise, like as far as, across the board. But Ashton Jeanty's the big question that UNLV has to answer. And here's what's difficult about it. You cannot look at the film this year and go, what did this team do that did anything to contain him? There's not one single snap that has worked out where he didn't do something. He's just dominant right now. So there's anything you have to do is going to be because you willed it to happen and you just had a great day, because he's making people look silly.
Yeah, this ought to be a hell of a game. Haj Malik Williams has been, a really good story for UNLV ever since taking over the quarterback spot. And, as far as non-Power 4 guys, Ashton Jeanty is the most talked about player, I think, in the country that doesn't play for, one of the Power 4s. But in terms of the best players that are on a list like that, I mean, Jeanty's definitely at the top, and Ricky White from UNLV is right there at the top as well. He's a really, really good player, so Boise's going to have their hands full with the offensive weapons that the Rebs throw out there, and I think this ought to be, a heck of a contest. Looking forward to it. I think last I saw that Boise was like 2.5-point favorites maybe, so Vegas expecting a pretty close game here as well, and obviously all eyes will be on Jeanty because he's kind of the household name now at this point. And I don't know if you guys caught it, but I mean, I'm sure you caught the Travis Hunter comments on Jeanty and just talking about the Heisman and things like that. But Jeanty got asked about Travis Hunter and kind of the comments being made. And I thought he handled himself really, really well. Didn't shoot back. You know, he just said, hey, kudos to Travis and that he's balling and he's doing stuff that we haven't seen before. And he doesn't take offense to any comments. But Hunter was definitely, like, more aggressive as far as, like, why he deserves to be the Heisman over a guy like Jeanty. And I thought, you know, if Jeanty wanted to be petty, he could have shot back. And instead, I thought he handled it really classy and, you know, didn't make it anything bigger than what it was. He's just going to go out there and do his thing. And, you know, if it's good enough, it's good enough. And if not, he'll tip his cap. So I appreciated that from him.
And we're going to have a note on him in a minute. But before we do that, Garrett, here's a note about UNLV and Boise State. Boise State's the number 2 ranked rushing offense in America. UNLV's defense is ranked 20th in the country. UNLV's offense, rushing the football, is ranked 5th in the country, and Boise State's defense is ranked 23rd in the country. So both of them run the ball incredibly efficiently and a lot of yards, and both of their defenses also do well against the run. So that will be fun to watch. By the way, that Barry Odom, can you tell that he played football with that look, that kind of half beard, kind of haven't shaved in 2 or 3 days, and just that neck that he has. Now, speaking of Ashton Jeanty, he is launching his own legacy scholarship fund. Boise State announced this earlier today. He'll have a Zoom meeting on this tomorrow. His own endowment for a scholarship for football designated to support future Bronco student athletes as they pursue their dreams.
I think it's pretty cool. I mean, do what you can with your name, image, likeness, and do what you can to help others out. I'll always be supportive of any endeavors like that, and it doesn't surprise me at all that he's doing things to help others because of the gist of having followed him and talked to him a couple times, but also knowing people who have worked with him closer. They have nothing but rave reviews, and so I commend anybody who's doing good stuff with their star power and their NIL and whatever else comes with that. And so great to see one of the biggest names in the game doing just that, and for it to be highlighted as well, because it is not as fun to talk about as the messier stuff, but there are some good things happening that years past wouldn't have been allowed. And you see things like this, and you're like, wow, that's really stupid that wouldn't have been allowed back in the day. And yet we were fighting against that in some ways. And, you know, and so I'm glad that there's some very obvious things that are allowed to occur now that should have been occurring all along.
Pat Colbert at Baylor had his family's house
burned down.
Burned down.
Yep.
And there was like they wanted to do GoFundMe and all this stuff, and they had to go through the NCAA clearinghouse and do all these things, and it took longer than it should have to raise the money for Pat Colbert's family, because this is a scholarship athlete who has no money. I mean, he didn't have any money. His family was not wealthy. They're from East Texas, right? East Texas.
Kilgore.
Yeah, Kilgore. Small house, like old house. You know, this was a huge deal, and the NCAA was going to be like, well, we don't know who could give money to that. Like, who cares? These people won't be homeless anymore. Yeah. Like, what are you worried about?
Nope, sorry. Can't give money to the athletes.
Yeah,
like do we realize how messed up that is?
So you had to, like, go.
Somebody burned it down so they could give him $100,000 to play offensive line at Baylor.
Eventually, several other coaches in the Big 12, like, on the behalf, and Gary Patterson was one of them.
Gary Patterson actually texted me. He goes, "What can we do for the young man in Kilgore?"
So,
he did. Yeah. During the most, angry of serious time. Yeah.
Like, what can we do? And finally, I think the NCAA is like, well, I mean, we need to monitor this and make sure that nobody gives them like $1 million. But yeah, I mean, let's go ahead and do it. Yeah, again, what if they do? Like,
if somebody wants to do that, and I get that they have to be careful, but now those rules are done. Now, a couple of other notes from viewers. I mentioned 2 or 3 of them yesterday, and I try to keep, if I can, sometimes something will pop up. I'll say, okay, let me put this in the calendar to come back with. Our good friend, retired stockbroker, went to one of our sponsors, Don Shumidor and Coffee Beans. There's a packet of some great cigars right there. And those are some of them from that Texas brand wall. There's some of the coffee beans, too. I think that stuff on the side, Paul, is something that Garrett would steal if he could. Looks like those might be, I'm not sure.
Not gummy action?
Retired stockbroker texted me and said those are when Les starts talking too much to him and he needs a break.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
He's going to kill me for that. But there we are. Thank you,
Hey,
retired stockbroker. I'm kidding, Les. He did not text me that.
I'll just tell you, as a gummy user, it doesn't really help that much.
No, it's not. It doesn't. But
I mean,
thank
no,
you.
the gummy helps, but like,
Yeah,
the,
no.
you know, yeah, no, like, hey, it does make it. But here's the problem: they start talking to you and they want an answer.
Who's they, Paul?
Your wives and the wives start talking to you, and you've taken this gummy, and then they ask you a question about, hey, what do you think we should do on the vacation next year? And you're like, you know what? Let's go to Margaritaville. And you're like, and they're like, that's not a real place. I'm like, it only isn't.
You don't know.
It only isn't if you say it's not.
You really don't know.
Yeah.
Yesterday when we had Phil Bennett on to talk about Seth Luttrell, Oklahoma, I got this from retired General Tom Turlington. I've known him for a long, long time. He goes, one of my favorite pleasures is watching the Monday segment with Phil Bennett on Tuesday mornings. Seth Luttrell, Muskogee rougher, his dad Jimmy, and until Seth was at OU, last white running back, he goes, Muskogee was my home of record for 25 years, family business, etc., Murray's Nissan. Keep up the good work. He was talking about Seth Luttrell and that family that has a lot of Oklahoma ties. So thank you, retired stockbroker, and then also retired General Tom Turlington. I would read Chad, Texas Tech fan's note to me right here, but he is not a big fan of Zach Kittley. There are some words in this note that I got from Chad. He's pissed off. He hates him, can't stand Kittley, says, my goodness. And Zach Kittley has a great history with what he does offensively. By the way, send Craig my best and look forward to meeting Paul and you and Craig at some point down the road. Would like to have a chance to shake your hand and enjoy a chance to have something to eat, too. So, Chad, thank you for your frustration. And also the
Is Zach Kittley the biggest problem there? I mean, it doesn't seem like that's the issue.
Well, we have a lot of Texas Tech fans inside of this chat room. We'll get their feedback on if he is.
Yeah, I think it has to do with just I think you kind of acknowledge that you're not going to be strong defensively, so you're hopeful that, like, your biggest strength's going to be able to carry you, and there's some frustrating things that occur at times in the Zach Kittley offense where it just, like you expect the defense to fail you at some point, right? Like, you expect – but, like, you need the offense to be really – does that make sense? Like, you're more of a focus on the offense because you expect more from it. Yeah. So when it doesn't work, you're amplified because – you don't expect the defense to be that great to begin with, but you have expectations for the offense, and you know that it needs to be really good for you to be as good as you can be. So when it's not, up to snuff in certain situations, or when you've had a track record of maybe having a few too many situations that are kind of bringing up the same bad feelings, then, people get worn out by that. And I think that's probably something, just his decisions as far as play callings and things like that people have seen the last 3 years that they're, especially after a loss like that on Saturday, not happy with. So, yeah, I mean, I would love for a Texas Tech fan to be more detailed than I can be possibly in explaining it because, yeah, from the outside looking in, you just see an offense that's like top of the league in scoring offense and this and that. But I've seen lots of complaints about Zach Kittley, even when they've won games, just about some of the decision-making and play calling at times.
Well,
so,
Craig, they had 455 yards in the loss Saturday. 150 came on those last two drives.
Yeah, the last two drives, I mean, those are both 10-play, 75-yard drives that ended in scores. And I know you can't just take away that touchdown but truly, if you don't want to count both of them, that last one was truly a garbage touchdown. And Aranda was pissed that his defense didn't stay focused for those because he felt like they were both a couple of garbage scores. Yeah. But those certainly twisted the overall outlook of that offense and made it look a lot different than what it actually was. So, yeah, there was some fluffing up of the offensive stats there in the last couple drives.
It's Sawyer Robertson's team. We mentioned the Campbell Award. He was fantastic, 5 touchdowns. He really has just taken that after Finn was hurt and they were struggling. It was cool to see DeQuan Finn get the long run to end the game. They was already over, but DeQuan Finn to get in. And you never know. Maybe there's an opportunity, a package or two that they use going forward, starting with Oklahoma State this weekend. Now, we got to put this in there. Vince Young is this is not me. Get off my lawn. I hope this is most of you too.
Actually, the the reaction has been how we feel about this.
Okay,
the
well,
minority is the ones that think this is actually cool.
All right, so the SEC is going to honor like Chase Daniel, Barry Switzer, Vince Young, and the SEC Legends Hall of Fame. I get that the records now shift to a different conference, but this to me, I don't like it.
It's dumb.
Okay,
it's
there
dumb.
you go. I'm trying to be, I'm always the one who's very, very nice about things.
It's dumb. It's revisionist history. It's ridiculous.
And it's not just because of Vince Young. Barry Switzer was never even a part of the Big 12.
Chase Daniel was
Chase Daniel at Missouri.
Okay.
It's like OJ's a part of the Big Ten Hall of Fame.
But Barry Switzer coached more games against SEC teams than Vince Young played. I have a trivia question for you, all you out there.
Let's see if the chat room can do this.
How many games did Vince Young play against teams that were SEC teams at the time? How many did he play in? Because remember, he was only the starter for 2 years, 2004 and 2005, at Texas. Both excellent years, and he's a College Football Hall of Famer for a reason. But how many games did he play personally against a team with an SEC patch on their uniform?
I'm going to guess 0 or 1.
One game against Arkansas in 2004 that they won 22-20. That is the only time. So Mizzou, Oklahoma, and A&M don't count because, again, those were Big 12 teams at the time. So he has a 2-point win over Arkansas. He's 1-0 as a starter against the SEC. Never again, after that game, his first year as a starter, played another SEC team.
Yeah, he threw for 150 yards and scored a couple of touchdowns. Cedric Benson had the huge game in that one. But let's,
and as a matter of fact,
what do you think? Like, what do you think about, and I get it, they're now, like, Dat wins in the SEC Legends Hall of Fame.
Do y'all remember when I made fun of this possibility 3 years ago?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do.
And I talked about this happening, and I was saying it mostly jokingly because, like, you wouldn't be that stupid about it, but I was definitely talking about Dat win back at that time.
Yeah.
And sure as hell, here we are, and they're actually doing it. They are doing it, and they are saying Vince Young, SEC legend, and Barry Switzer, SEC legend. So this isn't even a Big 12 thing. It's just, like, in general, you're just – it's the best phrase I've seen to describe this is stolen valor is what it is. It's absolutely stolen valor on the part of the SEC. And I know the ACC's taking credit for Stanford and Cal and some of them. Like, I don't know if they're announcing John Elway as a member of the new ACC Hall of Fame this year or something like that. But, you know, I hope that people, unlike a lot of other things, don't follow suit here. But I get that they probably will. But I think this is so lame, and I totally understand it, but I just think it's totally lame.
It's ridiculous. You don't need, like, they don't need this extra. So,
no.
Like, they have plenty of legends. Like, they don't have to.
It's just greedy snaky back at it again.
It is. It's so stupid to make them feel part of it. Well, guess what? You're probably going to have a couple guys from this Texas team and some Oklahoma teams in the future, or some Missouri players. Luther Burden's probably going to be one, right? Like, you don't have to just do this so that you include every school in the Hall of Fame. It's so dumb. I cannot stand revisionist history. And it's, I mean, even like Texas fans are like, what?
The majority of people that I've seen, even like when Texas posted this, a bunch of people are like goofing on it because they all think it's stupid. So like that's the saving grace to this, is that most anybody who's not like, hey, Paul, you know, calling the phone line right now, anybody who's not like that breed of person is thinking this is one of the dumbest things they've seen. So I'm glad to see that.
Well, it's going to sell tickets. They'll make some money, and it'll go into Greg Sankey's
That's
pocket.
not saying much, though. Like, I mean, it making money doesn't mean anything, because a lot of stupid stuff makes money.
You wonder, like, they had to have had a meeting. They've had this before. It's not the first time. But you wonder again, who else is going in? Oklahoma? Do they have
Adrian Peterson will be there in the next couple of years at this rate. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure he'll be in there pretty soon, Adrian Peterson. And Kyler Murray will be in there one day. And Baker Mayfield will be in. And when you start really going down that list, it's already dumb enough with Hall of Fame yet.
I bet he is. I don't have – you know what? I don't care enough to go look it up.
Well, I bet he's not, because this is the first year they're doing it. So, but my point is that, you know, he'll be in there soon.
He was the all-time leading rusher just for 2 years, but still, he was the all-time
James
leading
Street,
rusher.
the late James Street.
But this is when you
Royal.
look at like all the stats now, and I've seen plenty of people make this comment about this is what realignment has created. But yeah, when you see like the Big Ten has this many NFL Hall of Fame or Pro Football Hall of Famers, it's like how many of those guys went to USC and UCLA? And like it's just the revisionist stuff. I don't like it. I don't think that you need to go claim more territory than you already scooped up. And so yeah, I'm with I think the majority of people that this is lame as hell. Yeah. And it's just the beginning though.
Call our good friend Super Bill Bradley.
Palestine's very own UT stud.
And tell him you're an SEC legend, and he'll be like, is this a prank call?
Yeah, is that the –
Are you – yeah.
What is the SEC, a financial institution? Yeah, like, oh, God, I don't want to be a part of that one.
Yeah.